When my husband was sick, I bought a magnet and put it on my refrigerator, and I keep it there and look at it every day. That says, "Don't ruin tomorrow worrying. Don't ruin today worrying about tomorrow," um, because we have to live every day. Whether you have cancer or you're just walking down the street and something terrible could happen to you, we have to value every single day. And that may sound, like Rebecca Sunshine or something, but I really feel like a lot of us spend so much of our energy on angst instead of on joy. And I think that ultimately has a negative effect on the quality of our life.
Welcome back to another episode here on the Hart Hustle Podcast, where we speak to leaders in the nonprofit space or those in healthcare. And today we got President and CEO. I love to have great conversation with these leaders that are really making a difference. And a lot of the times it's their life journey that led them to this place. And Miss Mindy, thank you so much for your time. She is the President and CEO of ECAN. Sorry. Could you let us know a little bit more about just the organization itself?
So our organization, the Esophageal Cancer Action Network, is focused on advocating for patients at risk for esophageal cancer. And it isn't just patients diagnosed with esophageal cancer. We're really focused on prevention because I started the organization when I realized my husband was about to die of a disease that I thought was preventable because it had been caused by acid reflux. And what I'm saying to you is not that acid reflux was a symptom. I'm saying acid reflux was the cause of the cancer that killed my husband. And what I realized is that most people don't know that acid reflux can kill you. And, after my husband passed away, even though, we had 2 little kids, I just couldn't sleep at night thinking about all the other families that were going to go through what we went through. And so that's why I started the Esophageal Cancer Action Network. I thought that if we let people know that reflux could cause cancer, they would go get an endoscopy, they'd be diagnosed, and we'd save so many lives. And, nothing is ever as simple as you think it is when you start. Yeah. So I didn't know what I didn't know. And we learned a lot of lessons over the years, but we have made a difference.
In any business, whether it's the nonprofit space, the healthcare space, there's just big challenges. You kind of talked about it, right? That it wasn't easy. What are some of the biggest challenges you've actually faced early on getting just the word out there?
Yeah, so, because we're small and just for perspective, esophageal cancer is responsible for 1% of the cancer diagnoses in the United States, but it's responsible for 2.6% of the cancer deaths. So what we were dealing with was a pretty rare cancer that killed almost everybody who got it. So there wasn't a cadre of survivors who wanted to support us. And family members like me who were left behind, oftentimes, that's the worst time of their life. They never want to think about it again. They don't want to get involved with dealing with esophageal cancer issues sometimes because they feel like I've had enough of that. Luckily, we did have people who were more like me who said, I want to do something about that, but it's not 100%. So when you start whittling down how many people you really have for support, it becomes small. And the problem is that the universe of people who are at risk is large. There are probably more than 1 million Americans walking around right now with the precursor to esophageal cancer called Barrett's esophagus, and they don't know it. Mm-hmm. And most of them won't go on to get cancer, and thank goodness for that. But the ones who do, generally by the time the doctors figure out what's wrong, it's too late to do anything to save their lives. So that's the sad truth we're dealing with, and we're always trying to get the word out and helping people understand the dangers of esophageal cancer, the risks of esophageal cancer if you have reflux, but also, it isn't just reflux, right? Reflux causes it, but not everybody has reflux symptoms. And so that's a harder segment of the population for us to get access to. We really try to encourage doctors to become aware, but primary care doctors are busy. And, if you tell your doctor you have heartburn, they'll likely tell you to get some over-the-counter medicine. And that might take care of your symptoms, but it won't take care of your risk.
It's such a space that, like you mentioned, is the unknown. Because as I mentioned to you last time we were having a conversation, it was that I was experiencing the acid reflux for so long, right, for years actually, and they told me just stop drinking orange juice or stop eating spicy stuff. That was just kind of everything I had. And when I had this conversation with you and you told me about your husband, I'm like, oh my God, it could have easily been one of those moments where it was just, oh, just stop doing this and it'd be okay. But what happened if I wasn't? They continued to live on, and then here we are still with issues, as you mentioned, Mindy. And I
But
love,
getting rid of orange juice or hot food isn't going to prevent this.
yeah,
Because the
yeah,
problem is that the sphincter between your esophagus and your stomach isn't
mm-hmm,
operating properly. And so the contents of your stomach are coming up, regardless of what you're eating.
mm-hmm.
Um, they're coming into your esophagus, they're changing the lining of your esophagus. And when that cellular change starts, that's when you're at risk for cancer. So people think that if you change your diet, then you'll eliminate your risk. And that's not how it happens.
Yeah, and you mentioned to me last time as well, that really stuck with me, that this disease is a silent killer. Why is it often too late, and what symptoms should people look out for?
Yeah, so that's why we harp so much on reflux because really there aren't any symptoms of esophageal cancer until the day you can't swallow. By and large,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first time people realize that they're at risk. But if you can't swallow, that means you have a tumor so big in your esophagus that it's blocking the food from going down. And by the time you have a tumor that's that big, we just don't have the tools to fight it. And that's a big part of what we do now is advocate for more research funding because so little is known about this disease. So we don't have the kind of therapies that are very effective in a lot of other cancers. But we're working on it. We've added more than $20 million to the federal research budget for esophageal cancer research in the past 4 years. And hopefully we'll be able to keep doing it in the future. Who knows, given the landscape in Washington, but we're not stopping. We're
Yeah,
going to keep fighting for that because we think that's the only way we're going to be able to save people. We focus
100%.
on prevention, but if someone's diagnosed, you don't say, well, sorry, we caught it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you catch it late, this is the thing about esophageal cancer. Even if you catch it early, stage one, when you have small tumor hasn't really spread according to the studies, survival rate is still only under 50%. So it's so critical to catch it before it becomes cancer. And in some ways, we have this benefit because there is this precursor condition called Barrett's esophagus that
Mm-hmm.
can be treated and eliminated so that you don't have to go on to get cancer. But as I said, many people have Barrett's and don't know it. And there is Barrett's that doesn't lead to cancer, thank goodness. Most Barrett's doesn't lead to cancer. The problem is we're getting closer and closer to being able to figure out who's most at risk and treating those people. But people who have no symptoms, because Barrett's doesn't cause any symptoms, they don't know to even go to get checked. And so, unfortunately, many of the times that it's discovered, it's once people can't swallow. And by then, it's getting better. In 2021, they approved a couple of new immunotherapies for us. This past year, we had another targeted therapy approved. There are more drugs in the pipeline, and we're seeing gradually that survival rate
Mm-hmm.
increase. But we're still talking about only 1 out of 5 people surviving 5 years. That's not good.
And is this something that it's all across the board, male, female, or is it?
That affects men 4 times as often as it does women. And what's
Wow.
interesting is they haven't found the research that can explain that. But,
Yeah.
it's absolutely true no matter what country you go to. Esophageal cancer is far more prevalent in men than women. But women get it, and that's part of the problem in terms of, prevention with women, because a lot of times doctors think, the stereotype had been either because there's 2 types of esophageal cancer. There's one that's generally linked to drinking and smoking, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's the one that's caused by acid reflux. The one that's caused by acid reflux is the one that's most prevalent in the United States and other Western nations. But for many, many years, doctors just assumed if you thought esophageal cancer, you thought old white guys who smoked and drank. And now even those who are aware of esophageal adenocarcinoma for many years thought it was just, old white guys who had reflux and were fat.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's not just men. And so women who they are largely overlooked.
Yeah. I want to continue to educate our listeners. And for those that are actually, watching or listening right now, who has chronic reflux, like what steps should they take to be proactive about their health?
So one of the things that, because it's our natural inclination, right, to um, have a symptom, run out and buy something to take care of it, right? My mother used to live with the industrial sized bottle of Tums next to her bed, and that's how she lived.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people like that. We hear it
Hmm.
over and over again among our supporters. Um, and you get rid of the pain and then you go on because you don't think that reflux is a big deal. And in fact, you're probably not old enough to remember it, but when I was growing up, there was a whole series of commercials that made a big joke about it. You know, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. Oh, that's a spicy meatball. There were all this whole series of iconic commercials because they made fun of the idea that this isn't, this is kind of a joke, but it's
Yeah.
not a joke. It's deadly serious, and so that's not part of our culture, though. Most people think that heartburn and reflux are normal. Go get
Hmm.
something to take care of it; you'll be fine. And for some people, that works. But if you're one of the unlucky ones, you're probably going to be very unlucky because they aren't going to catch it until it's too late. So, what we recommend is if you're having those persistent symptoms, talk to your doctor about it, especially if you have some of the other risk factors. Like if you've had someone in your family who had Barrett's esophagus, which is a precursor condition, or esophageal cancer. Um, as well as there's a whole list of things that you should be looking out for and talking to your doctor about because especially we used to say as people got older they should have an upper endoscopy, but we're seeing an increase, a tripling in the number of young people diagnosed with this disease in the past several decades, and it's very troubling. The saddest case I know of is a 16-year-old boy
Wow.
diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer, and the treatment was so punishing that by the time he was 18, he'd gone through some trials, he'd taken treatment, and he finally said to his mother, this isn't living for me. I don't want to do this anymore. And his poor mother had to watch him die because he didn't, the treatment was so hard.
Hmm.
And, that's a heartbreaking story.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
need to be doing more to make sure that we're catching those cases early. And I've been encouraging a lot of the physicians who care about this stuff um, to bring together not just adult oncologists, but maybe some pediatric gastroenterologists, people who can take a look to see if we can catch those kids early, and try to figure out who's more at risk. We just don't know right now.
Very tough space, right? It's something that, as you mentioned, has never been addressed in all these years, but has been happening, and people had just kind of, whether it's put a band-aid on it or give, some, like I mentioned, just drink a little milk after you eat spicy, or don't drink the orange juice and all these different things. But it is a very serious matter. As you mentioned, a 16-year-old young male, right? There's no age preference. If it's happening, it's happening. People have to understand how to deal with it and how to catch it so early. If you just had one message that you can actually reach millions of people about this disease, what would that message sound like?
It's the message that we've had on everything that we put out ever since we started the organization. I'm going to pull off my little wristband here. It says heartburn can cause cancer.
Mm,
And we need to have a mind shift so that we no longer think of heartburn as just the normal thing.
yeah.
It's something you just live with. Because if you've got persistent reflux, you should be talking to your doctor about it, and hopefully your doctor will take it seriously. The one thing that's really great is that, when we first started telling people heartburn can cause cancer and people were going to get endoscopies, and the doctor said, well, you don't have enough risk factors for me to send you for an endoscopy because an endoscopy is a sedated procedure. It's not without risk, and it's expensive. And for the person who has it, they got to take a day off of work. It's a hassle.
Yeah.
What we're lucky today is that there are minimally invasive testing devices, one that's on the market already, and it's called the EsoGuard, that you can swallow what's essentially a balloon, and they can take some tissue samples right there at the junction of your esophagus and your stomach and send it off for a DNA test, and you can find out if you're at risk. It takes 5 minutes.
Wow.
And we've been working with a lot of the companies, because that's the only one that's on the market today. But we expect that over the next couple of years there will be more testing devices like that. But unless they're covered by insurance, there's not much value because people can't afford it. So we're really pushing for insurance coverage for this because it's life-saving. As I said, most people don't discover this disease until it's too late. If we can discover it early, treat the precursor, get rid of the precursor, and keep people alive, not only, when I'm talking to insurance companies, not only are you saving lives, but you're saving money too, because it's expensive to treat esophageal cancer.
One thing that really makes your organization really stand out, and we spoke about it, was the use of technology and innovation. You told us about this nutrition assistant. How does it work, and how does it actually help patients?
So we're really fortunate to have a partnership with a company called Savor Health. And they developed this AI model. They call it Ina. And the graphic is this beautiful woman, Ina. She's a cartoon character, really. But Ina stands for the Intelligent Nutrition Assistant.
Oh.
And 24/7, anybody with nutrition issues related to their cancer can send in a message that will be answered by AI using a database of really solid oncological nutrition data. And the other piece of it is, if they can't get that immediate answer through the bot, a real person is going to answer your question within 24 hours. So
Nice.
we're really proud that we're able to offer that service to our patients, because it's, you can imagine with esophageal cancer, what we haven't discussed is that if you're lucky enough that your disease has not spread, you are what they call eligible for an esophagectomy. And I will tell you that when my husband was diagnosed, I almost threw a party when we found out he could have an esophagectomy. Most people aren't throwing, a party because they're going to have some radical surgery. But really, at that point, we thought that was the only way he was going to survive. But let me tell you what they do. They take out your esophagus, usually the top of your stomach. They take that stomach and pull it up and reattach it to whatever's left of your esophagus up here. So, yeah.
Andy, how are we supposed to finish this? This just sounds, oh my God, so
It is.
horrific.
It's radical. And that person who has that surgery can never lie flat again, because there's nothing keeping that stuff from floating back up there, because they no longer have that
Oh my
sphincter that
God.
wasn't working well before. Now they have none. So they have to keep their head above, at an angle to the floor, because you're at risk for aspiration pneumonia. And I've
Wow.
actually seen people I know who had this disease, and I think over time you become a little less concerned, and maybe you lie flat a couple times, and we've lost really amazing people to that problem. And so while they had survived the cancer and they'd been able to lead a relatively normal life with the esophagectomy, they were still at risk. And so, it feels like minefields all around. And we feel like our obligation is to make sure people are informed. Because, like, my dream is that we can prevent everybody from having to have an esophagectomy,
Yeah.
to need to have this treatment that can be so punishing, that we can prevent this before it ever starts.
But not only do you have this, you've also have this clinical trial matching service powered by AI. You really, AI is that sexy word that people are using, but you really are in it. And this kind of shows, why is this so important for cancer patients, and what kind of impact has it really had?
So our clinical trial matching service is done in partnership with Massive Bio, and they've been our friends for a long time. And we were thrilled when they were able to offer this to our patients, because if you're a person who's been recently diagnosed with cancer, if you were to go to the website, it's a little better today than it used to be, but there's clinicaltrials.gov, where all the clinical trials that are going on in the country are listed. Actually, I think they're probably around the world. But as a patient, it's really hard to decipher what those trials parameters are, what you have to do to be qualified, and they're all over the place. So if you have a situation where you're constrained geographically, it's also hard. So what we've been able to do is, with this AI-powered clinical trial matching, take the information about the patient, which includes biomarkers. And that's another thing that we're really, trying to educate people on. They really need to get their biomarkers tested because that's going to decide a lot about what they're going to be eligible for. But you take the information about that patient, and with AI, you can figure out which trials are best for them. And our service doesn't just, do a robotic, here's your match, or here's some matches. They hold your hand through the process. They help you apply for the clinical trials. It's a difficult process. It's not like filling out a form to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's easy to get, but it's complicated and it takes time. And so I feel very fortunate that we were able to partner with Massive Bio to make that available to patients, because I think it's comforting to know that not only are you going to find the right place to go, but you're going to get help to get there.
No, I truly do love it. And I know that there's some new diagnostic tools available out there, but they're just not being widely adopted, it looks like.
Yeah.
What's preventing these doctors from actually using them?
That's a question that we have too, because we know there's something that they call Watts 3D, which is a brush biopsy technique that detects Barrett's esophagus much, much better than the standard forceps biopsy, which is what we do. And you think about, it makes sense if you think about it, because the esophagus is a long organ, right? It's a lot of space to cover. And so if you're taking a little piece here and a little piece there, you're likely to miss something. But if you have a brush, you're going to catch it all. And so with the brush biopsy, you can get a much better reading of what's actually going on in that esophagus. But it's not the way a lot of doctors who are practicing today were trained. And, anytime you introduce something new, generally I think people are somewhat resistant. And I've discovered that in the world of gastroenterologists, it's not enough for them to see a study or two that shows that it works. They want years of studies before they're going to start adopting something. And the problem, from my point of view, I understand that you want to be a gold standard provider, but when you're dealing with people at risk for a disease that has, as I said, and even at stage 1, less than a 50% survival rate, shouldn't we be able to kind of push this forward a little faster, because we can save more lives that way?
You're using so much AI. Is it something that you like? If you could really think about another AI tool, maybe to help communicate to donors, maybe the community, maybe your clients, if you can actually integrate AI tool, what does that actually look like for you?
So it's interesting you mentioned this, because I've been working on a project to, our website is full of very, very valuable information for patients and the whole community. But from my point of view, you'll find what you're looking for if you have a pick and an axe. It's not easy to access it. And so we're working on trying to streamline that. But as I was talking to our web designer, he said, Mindy, I could probably, if you're willing to scan every bit of information on your site, we can create basically a chat box where people can enter a question that can be answered by AI based on all of the information that's on our site. So if they had one question, based on what we already have on our site, they'd be able to come up with an answer. So I'm hoping we'll be able to implement that at some point.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely think that it's probably closer than you think. Personally.
No, he can do it tomorrow. If we can get the funding and I can get the time. I mean, I'm excited that it's possible. And it really, I think, will make everything that we have available there much more valuable and much more accessible.
Absolutely. And to just educate people, right? Like just
That's the point.
The conversation that I had with you the first time, and even this time, I'm just learning, Mindy, about something that I even know existed. That was a problem in this world.
Yeah.
But and as a male, it's kind of scary, especially when I told you a little bit of, it was just something that I was dealing with, and I just thought it was just normal. And then they made it even more normal when they said, just don't do this, right? But no, it could be even more painful than that. And obviously you've kind of experienced it firsthand. If you can kind of go back into those early days of this organization, because, sometimes we just do things and we forget to kind of go back and think about these things. But if you can go back to the early days of this organization and give yourself advice, what would you say to yourself?
Well, can I tell you a story? Do we have a few minutes for a story? When we first started ECAN, I told you my goal was to make sure everyone knew that they were at risk if they had reflux. But we wanted to make a difference. We weren't exactly sure how. We wanted to educate people. We wanted to make sure there was more research. We were fortunate that just as we got started, the National Cancer Institute was starting its project to map the genome of cancers called the Cancer Genome Atlas. They had 20 cancers on the list, and esophageal cancer was not one of them. And at that time, esophageal adenocarcinoma, the most prevalent type in this country, was the number one fastest increasing cancer in America. And so, I went down and banged on some tables and said, how can we not be on your list? We're the number one increase in cancer. And, they said, oh, well, we can't get the tissue samples. So I went back to the doctors on my board. I said, can we get them their tissue samples? And they went, yeah, probably. So we went back and said, we'll get the tissue samples. They said, well, that's nice, but we don't have the money. And, at that point, I'm working full time for free. We have $40,000 in the bank. And I said, well, wait a minute, how much do you need to start this? And they said, we need $500,000. And, my board was like, well, we have no money. We don't have $500,000. I said, yes, but you know what? I know that there are some very wealthy people who've been affected by this disease who, if we knocked on their door and said, NCI will do this really incredible research if you will fund it, that we could probably raise that money. $500,000 is not a lot of money in the world. To us, it was a lot of money, but in the world, it was not a lot of money. And so our board had a very intense discussion and agreed to send a letter to NCI saying, we'll raise the money if you'll put us in the project. And we sent the letter, and about 6 weeks later, I get a call from one of the researchers who was working on another piece of that project and said, you're going to get an invitation to participate in the disease working group of the Esophageal Cancer Pilot Project of TCGA. Wow. And I was so excited. I'm jumping up and down. When do we have to raise the money? And he said, I don't think you do. And I said, how's that possible? And he said, well, I think you shamed them into finding it in their budget. I don't care how we did it. The fact that we were there really mattered to me because my view was, esophageal cancer had been so ignored. I felt like genomic mapping, I think, is the train leaving the station. And if we're not on that train, we are once again left in the dust. Mm-hmm. But I didn't really know what it was going to lead to. And it did take a long time to get the tissue samples. And the study wasn't published until 2017. It's, the project started in 2011, wasn't published till 2017. But when it was, they discovered that esophageal cancer and esophageal adenocarcinoma and gastric cancer were very similar. And that meant that a lot of our patients ended up in clinical trials that were already slated for gastric cancer, especially for immunotherapies. And so in 2021, 2 immunotherapies were approved for esophageal cancer patients. And I'm going to be honest with you, Efren, I didn't put this together. I was interviewing the principal investigator of one of those studies. And she said, Mindy, if you hadn't gotten us into the TCGA, we wouldn't be here. And I said, and then I started thinking about it. She goes, if you hadn't gotten us into TCGA, your patients wouldn't have been in the study. And that was an aha moment for me. And I'm going to say this, yes, are we proud that we made that happen? Sure, we are. But that's not why I tell the story. I tell the story because I really want to encourage people. I don't care what you're doing. The day you start to think, I can't make a difference, it's just not true. Yeah. People can make a difference. Even teeny tiny little organizations with $40,000 in the bank can make a difference. It can save people's lives.
And Mindy, that's exactly what I took out of that story. That you showed up, you were persistent. You knew what you wanted. You knew that you were being impacted. So you said, I'm not stopping this fight. And if you just show up, if you just stay consistent and persistent, doors would open that you didn't even know were there.
Yeah, we had no idea this was possible. And I'll be honest with you, probably when people talk about our organization, when they say relentless, that's when I'm most proud. But it's not easy to stay relentless because you're swimming against the tide a lot of the time. I talked to one of the gastroenterologists who was at one of the early conferences, and I consider him a friend now and a big supporter of ECAN. But we talked about the early days, and he said, in the beginning, when I first met you, I thought, well, you're going to eat the elephant one bite at a time? He said, I didn't think you could make it. And he said, but here we are.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Yes. Listen, so to those that, for people who have lost a loved one to this cancer, or for those that are currently fighting, what can they do to actually continue to help drive this change the same way you've driven it for so many years?
So we work really hard to provide tools for those type of people who want to be involved. April is Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month. We started that back in 2009. And so we have a lot of tools on our website for you to raise awareness. If it's nothing even as simple as putting a yard sign in front of your house that says heartburn can cause cancer, with a link to our patient guide that explains how that works, to getting a proclamation from your governor, getting buildings to light up in periwinkle. We do a text a day service. So we'll send you a clip that you can share on your social media every single day of April. We try to provide as many tools as we can so that people can raise awareness. And we don't just do it in April. I always say every month is Esophageal Cancer Awareness Month to me, but this is the month that's been designated. The other thing that you can do, and it's really critical right now, is we have an advocacy tool on our website where you can go in, just put your address in, and you will automatically be able to send a message to your elected representatives in Congress to let them know that medical research for esophageal cancer really matters to you. We are at a critical time right now with regard to medical research, and we feel like if the voices of patients and people who care about this are not heard, we're not going to be able to make the kind of progress. We've seen progress in the last few years that's been really great, but I feel like the brakes are being put on, and we really need to make sure that that's not what happens going forward.
We're coming to an end here, but I would love to give you the time to really give any final thoughts or words of encouragement before we get to the blind question for people that are facing I love these blind questions, by the way. But for those that are facing health challenges or loss, what are your final thoughts or words from someone that has experienced it by the loss of her loved one, her husband, her forever soulmate, and then still fighting this battle all this time? What are those words of encouragement for people that are facing in this situation?
When my husband was sick, I bought a magnet and put it on my refrigerator, and I keep it there and look at it every day. That says, "Don't ruin tomorrow worrying. Don't ruin today worrying about tomorrow," because we have to live every day. Yeah. Whether you have cancer or you're just walking down the street and something terrible could happen to you, we have to value every single day. And that may sound, like Rebecca Sunshine or something, but I really feel like a lot of us spend so much of our energy on angst instead of on joy, and I think that ultimately has a negative effect on the quality of our life.
I want to say thank you so much, Mindy. It definitely has been a pleasure just educating myself, right? But not only educating myself, but we've been educating everyone that is actually listening that may had that heartburn and just thought it was nothing and they wanted to take a time about it. But really take it serious because it could be the difference between life or death. So definitely thank you for the time. And every leader, we end every conversation with a blind question from one leader to another. You never know what leader it was, but they had this question for you. If you woke up tomorrow and your organization had unlimited funding and resources, that's crazy, by the way. Yeah. Every barrier you face was removed. What was the first bold move you'll make to change the landscape of awareness and treatment?
If we have unlimited resources
and funding, don't forget the funding part.
Honestly, I think I would be launching a huge multi-million-dollar awareness campaign to make people aware not only about the link between reflux and cancer, but also some of the other risk factors, that the things that put people at risk for this disease, so that this is not a disease that nobody knows about. We did a poll in 2017 that found that only 14% of Americans know that reflux can lead to cancer. So I would put my energies and my resources into raising awareness in any possible way I could in that regard.
I love it. As I sit here and think about it before we end really quick, Mindy, is that you told me you did TV and you did radio, and I feel like all that, sometimes we do things in life and we don't know how that ever really kind of plays back. But it's these conversations, right? Is how you're able to, earlier you told me you like to share stories, you like to tell stories. And because of that early part of your life, you do so well at this level of your life. And it's only just growing. So again, just truly, I want to say thank you for your time, for being here. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. Again, we can go on forever. But Mindy, this has been a credible conversation. Thank you for your time, your passion, for sharing your story today. For everyone listening, be sure that you guys actually visit ECAN.org, okay? ECAN.org to learn more, spread awareness, and support the fight against this cancer that a lot of people don't even know, especially if you're a male. We learned some statistics today with Miss Mindy. And if you felt like this conversation really resonated with you, please make sure that you guys share this episode so we can continue to just make the movement in honor of Mindy, her husband, and everyone else that is battling this cancer. Thank you guys so much. We're going to continue to save lives. It's been a pleasure. My name is Ephraim, Hart Hustle Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.